Hey everyone, how's it going? Good, I suppose. This is Timmy pre-recorded, and in a bit you'll also hear me live. So this, first of all, does anyone use Reddit? I understand that among the audience there might be a split in attributions among those who like nerding out on theories, such as myself, and those who just want concise and practical information. In this presentation, I intend to accommodate all of you. One of the things that I will do is to condense some lengthy slides into snappier messages. I will use headers such as explain to me like I'm 5 and too long don't read to signal the audience of the messages. Now, for additional information that you might either find interesting or crucial for understanding some terminologies, please refer to side notes in the chat. Given the time that we have, it might be difficult for me to cover them all. Now, this study, I just called it the Whiteness in our BSW program, interrogating the epistemic injustice and white fragility that maintains the power structure of systematic ignorance. You may consider this presentation as my report of my mini-study interrogating the sameness in our BSW program. No less important are your voice. This is why towards the end of the presentation I like to hold space for your opinions on how our program should accommodate our self-determined desired learning outcomes. So, as you're nodding along, please feel free to also think about that. Abstracts for what we're going to do today. I did this mini study on the whiteness in the U of M BSW program, motivated by my own lived experience as a service user, aka as students in our program. Through my literature review, I conceptualize and problematize the homogeneity in the pedagogy, meaning the teaching methodologies. In that sense, you may say that inspired by critical whiteness framework, I conducted a narrative study, which contextualized as students, myself, lived experience according to the literature on epistemic injustice and white fragility. My study intend to hard sell our educators who practice liberatory pedagogy, in which they, as people in power, should proactively reflect on their false sense of neutrality and the need for control. Then we hope that they would seek to even out the power imbalance between instructors and students. At the end of the presentation, again, I hope to understand your testimony according to your own lived experience as students and also as educators. I want to inspire us to co-produce our own knowledge on what learning objectives we should have, and potentially advocates for fundamental changes in our BSW pedagogy. Sounds good? Good. Explain to me like I'm 5 here. So our BSW program is so white, in my personal opinion. Here are the things that grinds my gear. One, our Indigenous course doesn't pay tribute to any Indigenous pedagogy. Just a case in point, we don't get to learn about sweat lodge through the lens or our physical experience. Two, the policy analysis teaching, say the ideological assignments, has nothing to do with real life policy advocates practice. Three, the decision making on course goals too often, except this one we're in right now, is behind closed doors and often is are finalized by quote-unquote faculty leads. Fourth, when I problematize the methodologies for capacity building, I got red herring by instructors as they surveilled my professional tonality. Now, what's my heart desire from my education is that I hope I can learn how to do on-location investigations where I can interview the victims of colonizations amongst all other forms of oppression. Again, as a think piece, I hope that this presentation will start getting you to think about what you want out of your social work education, and I look forward to hear it. Okay, just so we're on the same page here, when I say social work is white, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with your skin tone, yo. Here I'm borrowing the critical whiteness theories framework in pointing out the ostensive neutrality that sounds like it is neutral, but it's not. So it's related to the myth of white innocence. Side note. Okay, I refer to whiteness here as the oppressive norm that are unchallenged, and whiteness as the domination of expressions, experience, and emotions. To my surprise, actually, Canada is not alone in this kind of problem. Australia, America, Canada each have social work scholars expressing that social work pedagogy lacks critical reflexivity to look within its own teaching. Concepts map, and please remain calm. I'll dive deeper into what I meant with the terminologies in the coming 2 slides. Just as a speed run here, I'm not sure if all of you have had a cursory understanding of what epistemic injustice and white fragility means. So here it is. White fragility is a performative vulnerability, and yes, harsh word. See sidenotes 1. Individuals might use the various defense mechanism to shield themselves from the confrontation between their own positive self-concepts and their systematic ignorance of others, usually racialized people's disadvantages. Epistemic injustice. Epistemic injustice arises typically because of a learning institution delegitimize and oppress groups' testimony, or ignore an intellectual tradition, or hinder students' inquiry altogether. Okay? Okay. So, in the maintenance of whiteness, pedagogical whiteness, educators might systematically perpetuate, systemically perpetuate epistemic injustice, and interpersonally perform white fragility. So on your left-hand side, you see that the educators can do so by either obstructing an intellectual inquiry, or 2, maintaining the power imbalance between teachers and students. On the right-hand side, you see people in power might deflect the call to reflection by dissociating themselves from a cohort in question, or by using emotional white fragility to tactically hijack a conversation. The first 2 aspects can be manifested through vertical pedagogical relationships, while the latter 2 are displayed through white speak, aka decorum. So down there, I'm gonna have the conceptualizations using the theory, and I'm gonna have practices, a fancy word for practice, um, evidence from my own testimony. Okay, we're getting into the crux of this. Brace yourself, and again, whenever you feel you find it overwhelming, read the TLDR and take a nap, okay? So in this slide and in the next slides, I'm gonna elaborate the conceptualization of our BSW programs, oppressive practices, evidence from my own testimony. And please understand that as I effectively interviews myself, my mini-study can only formalize as one service user's narrative study. So to generalize it, we'd have to collect others' testimony as well. Vertical pedagogical relationships. Part A of the theory, inauthentic methodologies. Either due to the instructor's needs for control in a classroom when discussing a complex matter such as race, or due to the lacking of the geosocial exposure to an oppressive environment. Social work pedagogy often misses the mark when fantasizing social actions. Here it asserts that the oversimplification of an actual practice might obscure the facts-finding pursuits by which students could otherwise follow through. Points B, parent balance between the educators and the learners. Here I'm standing on the Fiere's shoulders. I'm using lots of his literature. So in analyzing the power dynamics in a pedagogical institution, we'd ask 3 questions. The first one, here, we'd ask if learners need to climb a ladder of prestige according to someone else's standards. 2, we'd also ask if students have the accessibility to speak to power within our own institution. Now, finally, third, we'd ask if our educators work towards or away from easing learners' angst to appease the decision makers. Praxis. When examining the praxis of our program, I argue that we can see one of the aspects from the of the vertical relationships, evidenced by the fact that I don't get to see the whole truth of an actual policymaking workflow, or to redirect what we can do in our classes. I, for one, have a massive issue on the fact that we don't get to learn about sweat lodge on the land, and through and although we did have one token chapter acknowledging the importance of international social work, we virtually have no platform to study global humanitarian crises ongoing in the backdrop of the pandemic. I often find my energy for otherwise substantive truth-seeking consumed and competed by extraneous thought experiments. I recently, for points B, teacher get to choose and enforce their choices, while all students can do is to comply. I recently experienced instructors vilifying my inquiry to an assignment's purpose as an invitation to quote-unquote debates, and shutting me down by saying that it was finalized by quote-unquote faculty leads. that instructors also has shown animosity towards my challenge to their decisions that when they claim that students should not be chatting during class time. In at least 2 courses now, instructors would create assignments based on no published work and rewards nothing for literature reviews. Again, according to my experience, far too often our BSW instructors don't make the efforts to persuade students of the contemporary relevance of our course load, which leaves me feeling that I have spent 2 years drifting away from my anti-oppressive passions, all while doing busy work, placating nothing but marking schemes. Right, white fragility, aka decorum, again TLDR here. The white fragility literature has well documented the phenomenon where individuals seeking to retain their systematic ignorance would dissociate themselves from an accused cohort. Just as a side note, systematic ignorance is the simultaneous actions where a privileged person retain willful ignorance to an oppressive dynamics while paradoxically holds the prize of one's thinking capacity. See side notes 3. So it is a syntactical norm for formal speech announcing decisions to use passive voice and generalization. And yes, I am using some myself right now. Nonetheless, Gibson and Witts ask us to stay vigilant when hearing the syntactical tools and wonder if the speaker is trying to either one, dissociate themselves from an oppressive cohort, 2, evading the call to critical reflexivity, or 3, retaining systematic ignorance. Here on the emotional white fragility, aka white tears, I must first admit that it is a sensitive subject because it stands to question the sincerity of a person's heightened emotional states. I incline to always validate others' emotions except the times when I have in-depth knowledge of their motivations and personality. Here, what I'm wary of is the incidents where the needs for emotional safety is used to silence the call to anti-oppression. Leibel and Glaser 2019 pointed out that when feeling one's privilege is threatened, a typically white person interprets the challenge to privilege as a form of personal attack, to which they would react with an emotional outburst. Praxis, again, my testimony. Outside of my BSW program, I came across professors from statistics and computer science who would mistake academic inquiry for personal attack and epistemic criticism for threats to their professional authority. I once had a professor who would silence me for vocalizing a statement such as the marking appears draconian and unusual, in which they stifles my gesture to discuss why some wordings in the text were the be-all and all for the demonstration of mastery. Informed by the previous experience, my lens become watchful to the instructor's subtext when they claim that my challenge is either quote-unquote inappropriate or quote-unquote unprofessional. There have been restrictions on time limits and structures in the BSW program, which often supersedes the priority of knowledge mastery. I may not be able to express here verbatim of my interactions, but I shall state that I have I have felt that I have no space to revolutionize the misguided focus. Once again, the pursuit of academic acknowledgements paradoxically has then has done in the way of my truth seeking. How's everyone hanging so far? With this meme, we're officially in the 2/3 waypoints in my presentation. So if you want to take a sip of water, take a nap with the next minutes. So with this meme, all I'm trying to express is that for 4 problems, I have 1 solution: liberatory pedagogy. Okay, this slide is a little bit longer, so brace yourself. Again, whenever you need to, just go with the TLDR, okay? With this slides, I just want to flesh out that for our social work program to apply pedagogy, liberatory pedagogy, it is not merely just about enforcing sensitivity training. Below, I'm going to contrast it with something a little bit more within the box. So remember the book Felicia recommended in Bennett and Green's Force. They laid out 3 tools for social work pedagogy. One is that the program should create courses that disrupts accepted knowledge, which in itself is whiteness. 2, fostering the tendency to ensure epistemic uncertainty. See sidenotes 4, and to observe the discomforts it elicits without impulsively reacting to it. 3, and this is the most exemplifying example that shows the contrast. This race visibility teaching aims to have every aspect of a course, from the outline to teachers' works to assignments. We would hope that every aspect of them would verbalize the goal of racial awareness and to make students' white privilege visible. Here's the contrast. While the sentiments of passing on critical race practice in social work is commendable, and I would argue is necessary, the recommendations were yet to emphasize the agencies within learners. Should we agree to the principle of solution-focused practices, we shall understand that free will and initiatives should be the center of the cause of self-betterment. In case you haven't yet noticed, the studies on white fragilities are a repackaged discourse on battling systematic ignorance, borrowed from those on epistemic injustice. The latter comes from a rather niche discipline within educational philosophy, so the lingo could be tricky to comprehend. I did the paraphrasing for you so you don't have to, okay? So, in learning about liberatory pedagogy, we would see a few key concepts popping up again and again: authenticity, freedom, and awareness raising. Freerian educators has seemingly paradoxical tasks. On one hand, they would want to maximize learners' freedom, but on the other, they want to guide the students, especially those who live in some form of privilege, towards understanding oppression. The pedagogies, in plural, in unison still have the ultimate goal to help learners to A, realize and affirm their agencies in the world, and two, and B, deconstructs the devotion to an oppressive situation, meaning that you don't just get attached to how it is right now and believing that it won't change ever. One of the examples of how flexible and how much the liberatory pedagogy respects the free will among students is that even the desired outcome should be negotiable according to the students. So here are just three of the examples of what outcomes could be. However, in terms of the methodology, there's something the Freirean would believe is non-negotiable, namely for the educators to assume an active role to reflect on their contributions to the pedagogical power differentials between the educators and the educated. They believe that we can only speak of building the foundations for open communications, contextualizing realities, recovering learners' subjectivities, if we have consolidated the earnest attempts to build rapport and recover authenticity between the students and educator dynamics. I'd like to take a moment to focalize the side notes here. You see the clump of words here. The core purpose of the pedagogy is awareness raising, right? Now, there are a few very clumsy translations here. I would argue that those are yet another example that epistemic injustice is everywhere. Here are a series of bad translation. I even saw a paper saying that Paulo Freire, the founder of the pedagogy, quote unquote, coined the term conscientization, while in fact the words has always meant awareness in Portuguese. Poor translations of an influential literature often, I argue, make accessible knowledge in one culture inaccessible in another, which does injustice to teaching in racialized language. So to summarize this whole slide, explain to me like in 5. Liberatory pedagogy aims to raise awareness to end oppression. So anyways, as all I'm saying here is that while the free pedagogical approach on your left are fine and good, liberatory pedagogy is just excellent. Okay, so to round out my points in my sales pitch, selling my our BSW program to practice liberatory pedagogy, here are just some examples of how other educators have applied the pedagogy in their everyday practice. Here I'm reading it on the Sunwise direction. Some teachers co-produce knowledge with students about the subtext of majority views by generating themes. Others motivated students to research their lived experience and environments, which position the research process as the center of the pedagogy. Finally, there is also the surface learning, in which students contextualize their learning through local testimonies. Here are just 3 examples from the literature that I read about the application. I would suggest educators not to commit to one over another, because in the end, the power is yours. Yeah, the slides are going to be so embarrassing to listen to live. Anyways, that was my sales pitch. Again, my mini study was driven by my own lived experience as a BSW service user. Although I stand by my testimony, ultimately I can only situate my frustration and resolution to represent myself. For that matter, Felicia and I hope to nudge the Q&A session into a dialogue, one that which accumulates our narratives, one that would help us respect each other's lived experience, and hopefully it will help codify and produce anti-oppressive learning objectives. If you need guiding / probing questions, PTO, but obviously no penalty for going off topic, obvi. Okay, so probing questions here. Understand that some wordings might be confusing. Feel free to ask the live to me. As you're reading this, I'm gonna slowly sign off. Felicia, could you put up a whiteboard so that we can jot down their points? Also, as you're reading the 2.5 questions, I'm gonna slowly sign off, and the live Timmy will take over. We'll do it live. I'll write it down. We'll do it live.